Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know y'all with me, let's get it, baby, Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know you with me, let's get it.
Welcome back to another episode of Rockin' Royal, the podcast for those who rock the Y, the official podcast of BYU Athletics from KSL.com and KSL.com Sports Network. I'm your host, Sean Walker, as always, bringing you another update here on this podcast feed. We're going to get you ready for the NCAA Mountain Regional cross-country meet this weekend. That tips off this Friday. Led by number one ranked BYU cross country, both on the men's and women's side, both reigning Big 12 champions. And I had a chance to catch up with head coach Ed Eyestone, director of track and field and cross country at BYU, to kind of get a sense for his team and sort of where they're at headed into the regional meet. Obviously, the regionals, just kind of a step. It's the prelims, if you will, to the national meet. That'll be in a couple weeks in Madison, Wisconsin. BYU should be a contender, I think, for a national title right there as well. But before that, you got to get through the preliminary meet. That'll be in Reno, Nevada for the Mountain Region teams. We talked a little bit about that coming up in a pretty lengthy sit-down that I had with Coach Eyestone. So you'll want to stick around for that. But first, I wanted to touch on BYU football, because after surviving a dramatic 22-21 win over rival Utah, a win that came for a variety of reasons, I think. Yes, there was a pretty obvious holding penalty that was called on what would have been, could have been, maybe should have been, Utah fans will argue, the final play of the game. A holding penalty that kind of breathed some new life into BYU that allowed Jake Retzlaff to complete a game-winning drive that led to Will Farron's 44-yard field goal to win it 22-21. But there was also a stellar second-half defensive adjustment by defensive coordinator Jay Hill that I think needs to be acknowledged, and I think most people have been acknowledging as well. And additionally, quite frankly, an offensive no-show in the second half by Kyle Whittingham's Utah side that I think is probably being addressed in some circles on the Hill as well. I think all of these things can be true both simultaneously. All of them probably contributed to BYU's win, their first road win at Rice Stadium since 2006. Back-to-back wins in this rivalry series dating back to 2021 as well. Either way, the important thing, I believe, is BYU is 9-0, 6-0 in Big 12 play, and jumped up to number 6 in the college football playoff rankings, second selection unveiling. That is the highest CFP ranking in program history since the selection committee obviously came about a couple of years ago with a 14 playoff. Oregon was number 1, followed by Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, and Indiana. BYU came in at 6th, jumping one loss, 8-1 Tennessee, ahead of Notre Dame, Miami, and Alabama in the top 10. Georgia, which took its second loss of the year, fell all the way to number 12, and then Ole Miss came in just ahead of them at number 11. So that's kind of your top 12. Oh, Boise State was in at number 3, which, as a presumed Mountain West champion, would be the 5th highest rated champion. So if we were to seed the bracket, Boise State would jump into that 12 spot. Georgia would be the first team out, followed by SMU as well at number 14 overall. I believe BYU then, under the same metric, would be the number 3 seed. That's the 3rd highest rated, presumed conference champion among the FBS conferences. Obviously, Oregon number 1. You would have Texas number 2, BYU number 3, and Miami in at number 4 after their first loss of the year, which I think is a really big deal. I think the biggest deal isn't necessarily BYU jumping up to number 6, but being able to leapfrog ahead of the ACC champion because of Miami's first loss of the year. Again, that one to Georgia Tech. I think that's probably the bigger deal for BYU's playoff chances, because right now for the Cougars, it is a one-game season for the rest of the year. Home to Kansas this Saturday, at Arizona State, home to Houston. BYU needs to win out, guarantee its spot in the Big 12 championship and try to take care of business in Arlington, Texas against, well, there are a lot of possibilities in there. I believe Colorado is currently the front runner. If they win out the rest of the season, they will be in, but there are a number of possibilities for that Big 12 title game, which still has more than half of the conference still eligible with 3 weeks remaining for that spot in Arlington. So there's a lot of football left to be played. The important thing, I think, is the Big 12 is currently ahead of the presumed ACC champ. No idea if that will continue. This committee has shown that they're not afraid to drop teams. They're not afraid to move teams up. That's why I'm not necessarily concerned about BYU being at number 6, particularly ahead of that one-loss Tennessee. I personally didn't think they would jump Tennessee without a loss by the Vols. But Tennessee also has Georgia this weekend. So that suddenly is looking like a potential de facto elimination game for one of those SEC programs. Obviously, if Georgia takes its 3rd loss of the year, they're going to be completely out of the running for the playoff. And I think a 2-loss Tennessee team is probably not totally eliminated from playoff contention, but they're going to be on pretty thin ice at that point, and certainly behind a team like, say, an undefeated or a 1-loss BYU, maybe even a 2-loss Colorado. Who knows? We shall see. Again, it's still super early in that process. We don't want to dig too much into it, but figured I'd give a little bit of that update and kind of some thoughts as to how I feel about BYU's ranking. Ultimately, number 6 is nice, but it's still a 1-game season for BYU each week for the next 3 weeks, and then going into the Big 12 championship. Win out, try to get to the Big 12 title game. If you win that Big 12 championship, you don't need to worry about any of those at-large considerations. You're pretty much grandfathered in to the playoff as a result of the league that you stand in. So there's a quick CFP update right there. We will have more every week. I'll try to update you guys on this podcast feed weekly as we head up. We may be back by the end of the week to talk a little bit about Kansas, Jalen Daniels, etc. But for now, I wanted to get to BYU Director of Track and Field and Cross Country, Ed Eyestone, who sat down with me for a couple of minutes to discuss this Friday's NCAA Mountain Regional. Again, you can check that out at 1 p.m. Mountain Time from Washoe County Golf Course in Reno. Live stream is available. I'll include that somewhere in the show notes and on KSL.com as well. The Cougs are ranked number 1 in the country after winning the Big 12 championship, same as the BYU women's cross country team, ranked number 1 in the country after winning the Big 12 championship. These teams probably should be among the favorites in regionals, but they may not necessarily win it. Right now, regional meets are basically preliminary meets to the national championship in Madison. I wouldn't expect a completely full lineup for this BYU program in Reno, but I think there are going to be some pretty strong runners as well. And what we saw from those Big 12 championships in Waco is that this team is really deep. And that's actually what I wanted to talk about first with Coach Ed Eyestone. So here he is, the Director of Cross Country and Track and Field at BYU. Here now in the office of, I call him the GOAT of BYU, really one of the top coaches here on campus. And I don't feel like his program gets nearly enough credit. So we're going to shine some credit on the BYU Track and Field and Cross Country program. Cross Country regionals are this weekend, Friday, at Washoe Golf Course in Reno, Nevada. That's where BYU head coach Ed Eyestone and the BYU cross country teams will be at. Coach, thanks so much for sitting down with me for a couple of minutes to talk some cross.
Yeah, good to be here. We're excited about the upcoming regional and national meets.
You said something a couple weeks ago with the broadcast team right after the Big 12 championships that I kind of want to jump in with you and maybe follow up some with you. Because normally this time of year in cross country, everything is just kind of building towards nationals. You've got a conference meet for schools that have a conference, then you've got a regional meet, and it'll all build towards Madison, Wisconsin this year. But you said after you guys won that Big 12 championship that sometimes it's hard to celebrate
I can't remember your exact words, but you said basically sometimes it's hard to celebrate a conference title. Maybe we don't celebrate conference titles nearly enough in the sport in general. Do you feel like you got to the point of celebrating that Big 12 title enough as you kind of get ready for the regional meet year?
Yeah, I think what I meant with that is often, especially if you're a nationally ranked team, a team that's ranked in the top 10, then you're always looking at how can we improve, how can we win nationals or finish in the top 3 at nationals. And in doing so, sometimes you just neglect conference, and to recognize that that's a big accomplishment as well, particularly now that we're in the Big 12, where 3 of the top 4 ranked teams in the country currently are in the Big 12. So to basically go, tooth and nail against Oklahoma State and Iowa State and come out as champions at the Big 12, that was a huge meet for us because Oklahoma State was a big favorite, and so to upset them at the conference meet was huge. Now, some people would say, well, but that's not nationals. Well, you know what? There's 2 meets that really are, have any importance. There are 2 meets that I really care about, and they're the conference meet and the national meet. And so you want to win the conference meet, and we went, had a strong race, a smart race. We came through. We were behind, if it was a football analogy, we were behind for 3 quarters and all but the last 60 seconds, and then we won it on a game-winning field goal at the end, so to speak, which is kind of appropriate coming off the BYU win over Utah. But we were able to do that just in the last K. We went from 7 points down to winning by 11 points, so an 18-point swing in the last kilometer, or just over 800 meters of running, was pretty significant, and it was very cool to witness, and my guys were happy about it. And sometimes when that happens, then you have a tendency of just going, well, we got to wait until nationals. But no, this was huge. So this is the first Big 12 championship for a men's team at BYU, so let's celebrate that. They're not foregone conclusions anymore. In some of our past conferences, it was a real expectation that we were going to win the conference meet, and so now we've got a battle, and when we do win, we're going to make sure that we take time to enjoy that. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that you are not looking ahead, because I think I wore my Big 12 championship hat for that first week, and then I took that back off last week, said, okay, I'm not going to break that out again until nationals, and the focus now is the NCAA championships the Saturday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like you learned something about this team in those Big 12 championships in there, especially the depth of this team overall? All 5 of your scoring runners were in the top, I think, 12 or 13 in there. It's just an incredible, you mentioned kind of the comeback and everything, but the way they were able to win with that depth, did that teach you something about these guys and just how deep maybe this group can go?
Well, I knew coming in that we had a strong team. I also knew that the conference meet, getting all conference honors, top 15, one of the commentators was saying might actually be more difficult than getting first team All-American, which is top 40 at the national meet. And I had 6 of my runners finished in the top 15, so that tells you that you've got some pretty good depth. And I think my 6 guys were the first non-international runners as well, so homegrown here, most of whom come from Utah. Yeah, so I was very proud of that, and that they competed, that they weren't intimidated by the international competition that they were running against. So that was a nice thing, and it did remind me of the depth that we do have. That's good. And we didn't have a perfect day either. We had some guys that were, getting over colds and little injuries and whatnot. So, we'll just retool over this last 2 weeks, the 2 weeks or 3 weeks between conference and nationals, and now have an opportunity to hopefully get everybody healthy and running well and peaked and have our best race yet at the national meet.
I say this a little bit cheekily, I promise it's mostly cheeky, but maybe there's an air of truth to it. Do you feel like you kind of caught up to what the women's program is doing right now with back-to-back Big 12 titles and everything that's going on over there? And maybe how connected are these two groups kind of together, and in the way do they kind of sort of push each other and sort of compete a little bit with each other, the men's team and the women's team?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. I mean, I'm super proud of the way Coach Taylor runs her team, and the fact that they were the first team to win a Big 12 conference championship last year, and then to defend that this year. But we're very competitive individuals, but we're each one's biggest fan in terms of we want them to do well. This is BYU track and field and cross country that we're talking about. So we want to see us, and we want to be in a position where we're perennially doing the very best that we can. I don't think it's a matter of catching up with them, because we won the men have won an NCAA championship in cross country, and I think the number of athletes that we had at the Olympic Games, 5 from that were former men's cross-country runners, kind of speaks for itself. So I don't know that there needs to be a competition there, but I think we do take pride in how we are able to do.
Yeah, for sure. When you look ahead to this regional meet, obviously both teams heading up to Reno. I see you're already studying the course some. I won't take any photos or videos, don't worry. Yeah. So you're all safe there. But what kind of stands out about this region right now, going to Reno? You've been there before in some of your years leading this program or whatnot. So what kind of stands out about this regional meet?
Yeah, the regional meet, the best way to look at that is just preliminary heat going into the finals. So this is like the first round of the NCAAs is the regionals, and the national meet is the final. So in any heat in track and field, you want to run as fast as you can to qualify and to advance without doing damage to you, so you're fatigued from the prelim. And so we're doing, I think any of the top teams that are battling for a title are trying to run as conservative as possible, yet as safely to advance as possible. So what happens generally is we'll rest a couple of our people that we feel like would benefit from a week off, and then we'll put some people in who are very good. The nice thing about having good depth is that we'll be able to put people in there that will certainly compete very well and have them help us along in the process. I'll run my 7 best guys at the national meet, and I'll run probably my top 4 at the regional meet, and then put some subs in there so that we'll have some fresh legs, at least 3 pair of fresh legs going into the national meet.
And I know this is turning into so much of a team sport, but I got to ask you about just 1 or 2 of your guys individually. One in particular, I think he's kind of going out with a bang a little bit this year. It's Casey Klinger. Just what has he brought to this team kind of in his career, and are you seeing maybe even another level this year as he's working more into these big national competitions, both collegiately but also a little bit on the private side, as he kind of gets ready to be a professional and even look towards qualifying for Olympic Games and that sort of thing? Like, what have you seen out of him this year?
Yeah, well, Casey Klinger's a phenomenally talented runner. He finished 5th at our U.S. Olympic trials in the 10,000 meters, so he's the fifth best runner in the country. Just missed the Olympic team by 2 spots, and so obviously he is in a position to do great things. He's been leading our team very well all year. He'll be our first Cougar who will be, with the COVID year, a 5-time All-American. And the nice thing about having somebody like Casey is you can put him in the race, and he's going to be up front battling the elite international runners for top spots, and we'll send him out. And the best way you can be a good teammate in cross country is score 1 point for the team. In cross country, low points wins, and so for every place that you are, you get a point. And so if you're in first place, you are scoring 1 point for the team, and you want a low score. So the best thing you can do as a teammate is to run your very best race and to hopefully win overall or finish in the single digits, and then have teammates that are coming across the line right after you.
Last question, I'll get you out of here on this because we'll maybe look very briefly at nationals, but I want to also go back a little bit to those Big 12 championships because you touched on it right there. I mean, 3 of the top 4 teams in the country right now are coming out of the Big 12. You got you guys, Oklahoma State, Iowa State's in the top 5 right now, and I could go down literally the list of the entire conference, I think, just about. Do you feel like competing against these Big 12 teams has made you guys better, sort of set you up on a good path as you get ready for Madison?
Well, there's no doubt that when you race against the best, then it will do one of two things. It'll make you better, or it'll totally demoralize you. And so having Oklahoma State, who won the national meet last year, and we ended up 3rd last year, we knew that we were going to have to be on point to even be able to compete with them this year, because on paper they're actually a better team this year than last year. They brought in some more international athletes, and they're that much stronger. So yes, I think that we have risen to the occasion, and we have some upperclassmen on the team this year that will be moving on. So, this really is the year for us to do our very best. And if that means that we do our very best and we come in 2nd or 3rd place to some of these other amazing teams, so be it. But the main thing is, let's do our very best. Let's compete to the best of our ability. Let's be tough as nails. I've had talented teams before, and I've had tough teams before, but this is really kind of a combination of the two, tough and talented, and I think that will carry the day in 2 weeks at the national meet in Madison, Wisconsin.
I love that. Well, before you get there, regionals this Friday, 12 noon Mountain Time in Reno. A lot of people will be watching back here. Got a feeling a lot of fans will be on the course for you guys over at Reno, because it does feel like even BYU cross-country fans travel just like BYU fans in pretty much any sport. Coach, thanks so much for sitting down with me, and maybe we'll catch up with you a little bit after regionals.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Praying meetings every day, so we never stress. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy. Know you with me. Let's get it, baby. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy. Know you with me. Let's get it, baby.